Seneca once said that in our imagination, we suffer more than in real life. The 21st century is considered the era of anxiety, where we perceive pandemics, terrorism, political and economic upheavals as unique and unprecedented. Headlines, tweets, emails, it's literally everywhere. The world has never seen anything like this before. I hope you are well. In these challenging times, I have some good news. None of our problems are essentially new, and there is a methodology that has been working for over 2,000 years. Zeno used it after a shipwreck and losing everything. Stoicism helped Seneca endure 2 exiles and 2 natural disasters. George Washington sought advice from Stoics on the darkest days of the American Revolution. James Stockdale survived 7 years of imprisonment and torture using Stoic principles. Anxiety is often defined as a feeling of nervousness and unease caused by uncertainty. In the US alone, over 65 million people struggle with various forms of stress and anxiety, such as generalized anxiety disorder. It's important to realize that much of our suffering results from our own amplification, fabricated problems, or anticipation of anxiety. The coronavirus pandemic has changed our perception of familiar sources of anxiety. What used to cause stress is suddenly no longer a concern. Facing these changes, it's crucial to apply Stoic advice that has been helping people rid themselves of anxiety and worry for over 2,000 years. But nothing has changed. The reason is that anxiety has nothing to do with any of these things at all. Epictetus said that people are disturbed not by events themselves, but by their own perceptions of these events. The same was emphasized by Marcus Aurelius. Today, I have rid myself of all anxiety, or more precisely, I have discarded it because it was within me, in my own perception, not external. We tell ourselves that we experience stress, anxiety, and worry due to the pressure from our boss, approaching deadlines, places we have to visit, and people we have to meet. However, anxiety comes from within. We create our own anxiety. This means that we can also let it go, without a doubt. Marcus Aurelius had plenty of reasons for anxiety: epidemics, wars, natural disasters, financial crisis, personal insecurity, health problems, and the loss of children. His life was full of stress and worries. However, he not only survived, but also preserved an entire empire because amid extraordinary difficulties, he managed not only to survive, but also to maintain the empire. Marcus Aurelius relied on the philosophy of Stoicism, using what he learned from the works of Zeno, Epictetus, and other Stoics. He used 5 principles, which I will tell you about later. Let's go. Marcus Aurelius said, "In defining or describing each phenomenon and object, we must approach them in such a way that we can reveal their essence under the external cover, break them down into parts, and call each element by its name." Mark mentioned that his stresses and worries were merely products of misguided perceptions to which he clung. They were monsters created by himself. He advised to penetrate through these perceptions and see what they truly are. The emperor was not arrogant. He constantly reminded himself that his imperial purple mantle was nothing more than sheep's wool dyed with the blood of mollusks. Lavish seafood dinners were just dead fish, and elite wines were merely fermented grapes. Thus, he unmasked the monsters. Anxiety can be so profound that it is capable of paralyzing us. Doubts, uncertainty, fear, unease, pressure, nervousness, they whirl inside us, and we don't know what to do. Matthew Lieberman, a professor of psychology at the University of California and the founder of social cognitive neuroscience, used MRI studies to demonstrate that simply identifying the cause of an emotion calms our brains. When subjects were shown images and asked to identify the associated emotion, the activity in the brain region that triggers emotional reactions decreased, while the activity in the area associated with vigilance and cognitive control increased. Marcus Aurelius urged us to expose things and remove the masks that cover them. We should understand what they consist of, how long they will last, and what approach to take: courage, humility, or moderation. If negative thoughts and emotions are allowed to run wild, they will behave like beasts released from their cage. Ready to pounce on us, they will awaken our fears, stir our emotions, and ruin our lives. Stress, anxiety, and anger become chronic and exhausting if they accumulate for too long. They become an apparently unbeatable enemy unless we gather the strength to unmask what these emotions provoke. We might be stuck in traffic, miss a birthday party, skip a couple of hours at a restaurant, or not have our intriguing presentation make the desired impact. Listeners perceive the world from their perspective, and that's perfectly natural. Sometimes we have to leave everything behind and urgently leave the country. It's just a matter of perspective. We find ourselves in a different place. As Seneca spoke, the hostility of fate can only break those who were deceived by its former favor. According to the fundamental premise of Stoicism, the only thing we should not do is immediately accept our impression. Seneca advises us to stop and examine it with every thought. We must have the discipline to ask ourselves, is this a fact or a fiction? We shouldn't think in terms of whether things will go well or not. Things simply unfold as they do. Call things by their names, as Marcus Aurelius said. Remind yourself that what oppresses you is neither the future nor the past, but always the present. It's true, we are constantly haunted by perpetual anxiety about being in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing, and engaging with the wrong people. We long to go on vacation, buy a new car, or find a new job. All the while Seneca remarked on the benefits of crossing seas and changing cities. If you want to escape what troubles you, it's not about changing places, it's about changing yourself. Julian Blount expressed an interesting idea. The stronger your desire to go somewhere, the more you hate the place you are in right now. Marcus, in his writings, emphasizes the words real and the present moment more than 20 times. He consistently reminds himself not to worry about the past or the future. Embrace the present moment as it is. Our entire life is a series of real moments, and everything else is either already lived or shrouded in the fog of uncertainty. The anxiety that has become natural for us robs this treasure from us. Instead of fully experiencing each moment, we allocate it the portion stolen by the device in our pocket. Then we wonder why time flies by unnoticed. Seneca himself stated that the biggest obstacle to life is the anticipation of tomorrow and the loss of today. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, writes that we should be ashamed of ourselves. All the days and years of our lives pass in a fairyland of beauty, but we are too blind to see it and too saturated to enjoy it. At times, it is essential to know when to pause, whether it's doing the dishes, sitting in traffic, or working on a dissertation. Be present where you are, whether with your family, at a new job, or in a doctor's office, at this very moment. We stand at the intersection of two eternities, the vast past that lasted infinitely, and the future that will rush into our lives as soon as the last second of the present ends. However, we cannot live in either of these eternities. Trying to do so harms our mind and body. So, let's live where we can. Theodore Roosevelt once said a wonderful phrase, "Do what you can, with what you have, where you are." As Seneca mentioned, the hardest blow to endure is the one we weren't prepared for. Unpredictability adds weight to adversity. We need to think about everything and strengthen our spirit against anything that could happen. Keep in mind the prospect of torture, war, illness, shipwreck. In a moment, it can take away your homeland and deform you, cast you into the desert, turn the desert into a place where people now suffocate in the crowd. Have everything that is part of the human condition before your eyes. Anticipate the worst, not as it often happens, but that very worst that can occur. In the year 60 AD, Seneca received a letter from Lucilius, who was anxious about a lengthy legal process, seeking advice from his master. Seneca replied, Why ruin your life now with fear of the future? It's foolish to feel miserable because you will become unhappy someday. He essentially told him that whatever will happen, so stop worrying. It might seem strange to hear this from a person who essentially created the exercise of anticipating failure. It's even more peculiar considering that in the same letter, Seneca tells Lucilius that if you want to get rid of all anxiety, imagine that the frightening thing you fear will inevitably happen. How does this work? And isn't this contradictory advice? Not at all. The purpose of negative visualization is not to make us worry. Far from it. As Seneca continues, if you want to get rid of all anxiety, just imagine that the scary thing you fear will happen simultaneously, and no matter how great or how long the disaster may be, find its measure and whip your fear. Then you will surely understand that the misfortune you fear is either not as great or not as prolonged as you imagined. By envisioning evil in the future, we deprive it of power in the present, giving us the opportunity to prepare for the worst-case scenario. And even if it does happen, there's literally no point in suffering prematurely. The agony of being burned is terrible, but it's even more dreadful when you're the one setting yourself on fire. Typically, people try to alleviate anxiety about the future by encouraging and consoling themselves that everything will be okay. However, in doing so, we unconsciously reinforce our beliefs that the onset of the worst-case scenario will be a true catastrophe for us. Losing a job doesn't mean starving to death, and losing a loved one doesn't imply eternal solitude. The essence is that such panic arises only in cases where the corresponding outcome hasn't been thoroughly thought out. This technique, widely used in cognitive behavioral therapy, is called decatastrophizing. It involves re-evaluating situations in calmer tones, making them seem less overwhelming, and allowing a person to find more realistic and composed ways to cope with them. A more realistic and restrained perspective helps reduce the level of anxiety. Of course, there may be setbacks along the way, but saying that it's the end of the world is a clear exaggeration. Epictetus said, "When I see a troubled person, I always ask myself, what does he want? Because if he only wanted what is within his control, he would have no reason to worry." People go crazy because of the disturbance of their loved ones. What do they want? Peace in a world without danger. And what does the nervous trader want? Bitcoin to go up, and all his investments to pay off. All these situations share a common trait, the desire for something beyond our control. The agitation, nervous pacing, these tense and anxious moments portray us in the most useless and enslaved light. Checking the clock, refreshing the phone to check the Bitcoin price, it looks somewhat like being members of an ancient tribe who believe that the gods will grant their favor if we sacrifice our mental peace. From now on, every time you find yourself worrying, ask yourself if what I'm worrying about is within my control. Seneca said that everything necessary for our well-being is right in front of us, while a luxurious life is tied to constant worry about losing possessions, mixed with the desire for more. Seneca faced criticism for preaching Stoic virtues while amassing one of the largest fortunes in Rome. Some historians speculate that the large loans he provided to the inhabitants of present-day Britain led to a brutal uprising. Critics labeled him a wealthy hypocrite, but Seneca's response was straightforward. His wealth did not control him. Despite his fortune, he did not consider himself a spendthrift or a pleasure seeker. Whether there was hypocrisy in his words or not, they still provide valuable insights for managing our anxieties, especially in a world where so much attention is given to money and status. Mark, at one point, told the Senate that he did not possess any of his wealth for himself. "It belongs to the people," he said. Even the house he lived in was not his own. When the state treasury was depleted, he didn't think about demanding additional taxes from the province to cover the expenses. Instead, he organized a sale of royal property selling gold crystal goblets, imperial vessels, and even his wife's silk garments. This sale lasted for 2 months and generated so much gold that all the problems were resolved. Peace emerges when we stop believing that money will make us happy. Epicurus said that many who accumulated wealth found it to be not the end of troubles, but merely the beginning of different ones. Chuck Palahniuk spoke of this, stating that we buy things we don't need with money. We don't have to impress people we don't like. Always remember that a person can be happy with very little. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. It greatly helps in promoting the channel and videos. Goodbye and until next time.